Okay. I think we could start on that note then. So, hello, my name is Daniel. I'm this year's Vice President of the AAS chapter at Spitzer School of Architecture, and today I'll be moderating the graduate student panel. Our goal is to share with the current students the experience, decision-making, and effect in one's career that comes with pursuing higher education. In this case, we're only exploring one potential career path and dwelling on its pros and cons. In the past, I think we've talked about this in school as different careers, what you would like to do after school. A lot of people like to work. I think this conversation is typically not spoken that much. We bring alumni from different stages in the career of a graduate student and hopefully kind of talk on these elements. I think we can start to introduce ourselves through name, graduation year. I'll write these down into the chat. Using these prompts, starting with Alicia.
I'm Alicia. I graduated from B.Arch. Oh, also my pronouns are she, her. I'll toss that in there because you guys didn't have it. This past year, so 2021, and now I'm at the University of Edinburgh studying architectural conservation.
And second,
Popcorn Benji.
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Benji Akhaven. I graduated from City College with a B.Arch degree in 2020 in the midst of a pandemic. And I actually just finished my graduate degree at Columbia University, the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation in Advanced Architectural Design, also amidst the pandemic. Do I call on someone?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, Alejandra, go ahead.
Thanks, Benji. Hi, everyone. I'm Alejandra. My pronouns are she, her. I also graduated from the B.Arch in 2020, and now I'm studying a master's in data analytics in Yeshiva University, and I'll graduate next year, actually. And I'll pass it to Chitra.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Chitra Mamidela. I graduated 2017 from the B.Arch program, and then 2019 from CCNY as well, Masters in Sustainability in the Urban Environment, and that was 2019. Yeah. Who's next? Moises?
Hi, everyone. My name is Moises Quintero, and me and Alicia graduated at the same time, so this past June. And currently I'm at our Harvard Graduate School of Design pursuing my MArch 2.
All right. Now with all the panelists being introduced, we could start with a very simple question of how do you find your graduate school? I'd say particularly when, maybe is a better question too. Would you say early on in your career, immediately right when you're supposed to apply? Anything on that topic? I think we could start again with Alicia.
Hi, everyone. I was kind of toying with the idea for a long time, and even up to, I would say, like fall, before I graduated, I was still kind of playing with the idea, but I was starting to do a little bit of research. So I applied like pretty much during my last year, my final year, and it's just like something you have to think about a little bit and then be prepared for the research phase, I would say, if that's something you plan on doing directly out of school, because then you have to tackle both studio work and applications. And thankfully, most of my applications were due like January, so I had winter break to do them, but kind of balancing those two was something that I had to think about a lot. But I was like pretty on schedule average, I'd say. Not that like any journey is average, but for someone that's in their 5th year thinking about going right after school, that's what I would say.
We could probably go Benji and then Alejandra.
Sure. So I'm a planner, so I kind of knew that I wanted to go to graduate school probably by the end of the 1st year of school, because I knew I wanted to teach. And because I knew I wanted to teach, I knew I needed to get a master's in something. By the end of my 3rd year, beginning of 4th year, I kind of knew I wanted to do the architecture specialization, I guess, or not specialization, generalization. And then by the beginning of my 5th year, I knew which program I wanted to go to and like which program I was really interested in. And so I applied in my 5th year, and then I got in and I went immediately afterwards.
I think for me, it was actually the complete opposite. I wasn't planning on going to graduate school, but on my 4th and 5th year, I started to do research in addition to studio. I was at the J. Max Bond Center. And what we were doing there was a little bit outside of traditional architecture, which really started to interest me and be connected to what I was looking at in studio. And I realized I wanted to expand my skill set. When I was on my 5th year, of course, the pandemic started, and I thought to myself, it's a good time really that if I do want to pursue something sort of outside of the traditional, to start to obtain those skills. And I thought, continuing research through graduate school would be the perfect opportunity. This was around like the fall semester on the last year, and I was applying also during winter break, and some of the schools that I found had rolling applications, which means that there's not a deadline. You just kind of can apply and be accepted until the positions are filled. So that was really good for me since I wasn't planning on it beforehand.
Then we'll follow Chitra and Moises.
For me, it was similar to Alejandra, right? So I did not expect to apply for grad school. So I think like a month before applications are due, I got really interested, and I'm like, oh, I have to apply right away. And I was approached by Professor Lance Brown, and that's kind of what also motivated me to pursue my master's in it. I was thinking about doing it. I didn't know if I wanted a break before doing it or not. I think that was my confusion at that time, but I figured it would be just easier. I had the energy just to continue right after school, and I figured maybe life might get a little more difficult later. So I started looking into programs, and yeah. Moises?
So for me, I also didn't know up until like 3rd, 4th year, because I had taken a break from my B.Arch. So I actually started back in 2013, I believe, and I took a 3-year break. And I guess like during that break, I kind of felt like, oh, I don't need to go back to school to finish the undergrad. But then I came back just to finish. And then when I came back, I was in like this rush to finish the undergrad. But then during my 3rd year, I was like, maybe I should try to enjoy this journey that is undergrad, right? So then I took this course at Harvard called Design Discovery, where it's like, where they teach you like fundamentals of like architecture, landscape, or whatever. And from there, I just like felt this ignition of like the passion that I originally had, which made me stick to art. And then I talked to a professor who also attended GSD, and she was like, you could actually, I would think you would be a great fit for that. Consider that. So then I took her fall of 2014, and then I took her again for fall of my 5th year. And then we had a talk. She was like, are you considering it? I'm like, not really, because I wanted to take a break before going back to school, because the school one was super intense. But then she was like, might as well try. And then I tried, and then I just ended up getting in.
So for what I'm collecting, there's a lot of, towards the end of your career, let's say 3rd or 4th year is typically when this idea comes out. And for the most part, going towards graduate school or master's program is trying to learn more skills, if anything, trying to expand your skills set, which is interesting. I would have expected for myself, at least, to think about it as validation. There's that other topic that I was hoping to maybe see. A lot of people feel that the need to see an Ivy League or a larger education to help you sort of get your jobs and other things, which I would say is denouncing that is not as needed as people think. But then another topic, I think this one's just to start to dwell on this topic of finances. Knowing, I think here the through line between all 5 is that everyone here is immediately gone to graduate school after finishing their B.Arch, which is interesting to think about in terms of now, how did you manage the money aspect of things? I think I'll just play around with the order. Let's start with Alejandra in terms of what helped you dictate money in terms of applying to these programs.
So actually, yeah, when I was looking for schools, I was just looking at those that had good financial programs that I saw that whether, I TA'd or I maintained a certain GPA, I would receive some kind of aid. In addition to that, it was important for me to be able to pursue a program that I could manage while I was working, because I was also looking for a job. So part of the financing came from the school itself, and the other part, I was lucky enough to find a place that was also supporting me through my graduate school. So they are putting a certain amount there as well. So if you're thinking of working, that is one of the things that you could consider, or think of what you're going to be getting as a benefit, or your pay, that you'll be able to manage that. So once I, like made math, I was like, okay, I can do these schools, and I applied just to those.
Then we can move to, I believe, Benji. I do personally remember you always working, which is always interesting in terms of finances for that too.
Yeah. So speaking of working, I went to an expensive school, and I started saving up while I was in undergrad, because I knew that this was something I was going to do. So I was very, I guess, frugal in terms of like going out and doing stuff, and like really thinking about the future, so I wouldn't have to rely on other people. So I was able to pay for about half of school by myself, and then half of it I took student loans. And so the rationale for student loans is that some of the work that I want to do, I can't do without a master's degree, or at least it's very difficult to do without a master's degree. So in a way, by investing in going to graduate school to be able to do those things, I would be able to pay off graduate school going forward. And so I was able to mitigate it so that the student loans aren't overwhelming. Also, that was part of the reason why I chose a one-year degree program, is because overall the tuition is less, and also you're out of work, like in the sense that you can't work for only 1 year as opposed to multiple years, which might be difficult. Also, I chose something that was local. That way I could save on room and board, although that didn't really matter during the pandemic. But like just having those ideas, I think like a comprehensive thought process was really helpful, and trying to understand, and also like thinking of plan A and plan B and all those decisions.
Thank you. And Moises?
I think because everything came so fast, I didn't really, I guess, like think about the finances. But I guess like fortunately for me, it ended up working out because well, these schools have a lot of money, right? Well, at least depending on where you apply. And I feel like if you feel very passionate about going, and it also helps to have multiple offers from like schools that are, I guess, like similar in nature, that can be a negotiating leverage that you can use against them. And so I did that, and I just built a case for myself, and I was able to get, I guess, like a above average financial aid, and I took out some loans as well, and then my parents are helping with a little bit of that too. So yeah.
Alicia?
Yeah, so everyone's kind of touched on it a little bit. I am mainly taking out loans, but like Moises said, I would absolutely, there's no harm in asking. And if you have other offers, you should absolutely do that. And I did that with all of the institutions, and I kind of like just had that discussion honestly, and like, because it is a big investment in yourself. So that's one thing. And then the other part of it is I also am in a one-year program, which was kind of part of my deciding factor, because the cost for going 1 year rather than longer, it just kind of made sense. And a lot of Excel sheets, honestly, and applying and everything else in financing, like just kind of seeing what you're getting yourself into before you accept anything.
And finally, Chitra.
Yeah, so for me, I picked CCNY mainly because of the finances. I wanted to find a program that was give me the education that I wanted, and I did not want to take out any loans. That was a priority for me. I didn't want to also compromise and wait. So I started, since I knew I was gonna go into grad school, I was working while I was in undergrad as well, like Benji did. And yeah, I would just save up. And to be honest, undergrad was covered through a scholarship, the A scholarship for me a little bit, and also other school scholarships. So for me, I was able to save up for grad school in that way too.
From what I'm collecting from everyone's input is that, I mean, obviously finances become a big factor in terms of what you're going to be doing in terms of master's degree. In some cases, having money saved, in some cases, having to see the financial packages given, in other cases, literally looking at the financial packages given and kind of like playing around with Excel sheets or planning out how much money you're going to be spending in that year will help you understand whether it's worth it in the long run. I'm assuming everyone's trying to avoid as much of a loan as possible because, interests and how capitalism works. I mean, all that sense. But that all brings me into the next point of now application processes. So I think Xavier actually just asked, but I'll continue to add on to his point of your application process and what did you do that maybe had you stand out in your portfolio? What did you try to do before applying to that program? I believe there's also what tips would you give someone that went through an interview process of it? Anything in the application process that you'd like to give yourself if you were to be able to speak to yourself in your third or fourth year? This one I'll start with Benji.
So the school I applied to didn't have an application process. They looked at your portfolio mainly, and I think your like overall activities or resume, CV, to kind of get an idea of who you are and like whether or not you would be accepted to the program. I think a common misconception is that it's harder to get into these programs than they actually are, especially for CCNY students. Like we can do, like get into any program. So some advice I would give myself is to network and ask around a lot more than I did, not just within City College, but within the schools that I was thinking of, or like people that work there, reach out to professors, reach out to the program directors. And they're relatively accessible in the sense that they'll answer your emails, but then that gives them like kind of this connection to you in a way that makes them more interested in you and being in the program, which can, to a certain extent, I think it can help you when you're at the program. It might not necessarily help get into the program because it might be a different office, the admissions office that decides, but like in the long run, it'll help you with your entire education, like creating those relationships and bonds. So you can learn more about the school before you go there.
Then thank you for that. And then we can go into Alicia.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. For starters, I did not have to include a portfolio anywhere. So what I had to send in was like essays and stuff like that. And really letting your personality shine through, like make the essay appropriate, but also make it sound like it comes from you. And then additionally, I would say like have good connections to whoever is writing your letters of recommendation. Don't just pick someone that like you kind of knew because you think they have a connection to the school. Like develop a relationship with them and make sure they really know you and you're putting your best foot forward. And then I see a question about the GRE. I specifically picked schools that had waived the GRE or didn't require it because I just didn't want to have to take it for like one school. So if I saw that they needed it, I just kind of lost it off my list. But if they want to know who you are as a person, and like I think that you should like make that the shining star, because like Benji said, as CCNY students, we are very capable, and like make it rock, you know.
Alejandra.
Yeah, I think it was a bit similar to what Alicia described. found schools that also the requirements and things they needed fit what, you know, I was willing to do. So no GRE. I mostly had to do essays, and that's like the perfect opportunity to, like, as she said, exactly like what you're interested on and your personality shine through and demonstrate why, you know, they should, like, that's also where you can even like start showing them why they should invest in you in terms of financials, and why it's like you're such a perfect addition to their alumni group in the future, and etc. And because I specifically was applying to a program that was not directly architecture, it did require an interview to sort of fill in that gap, so that they would make sure, you know, that I knew what I was getting myself into, and that they understood why someone coming from an architecture background wanted to explore different skill sets. So again, just like a lot of personality, and like really work while you're in your B.Arch, or even if you're already on your M.Arch, on your soft skills, like doing small talk and all of those things that are required to be really good at network become super important for interviews, for like meeting professors, getting like on their research list, or, you know, being included in projects, etc. That is super important.
Chitra?
If you guys know what the sustainability program is, it's an interdisciplinary program. So it's architecture, engineering, science, and social sciences. All of the schools come together and host classes. So we have a lot of architecture classes as well that we took. However, you can specialize, you can go in with the focus. And I did pick architecture, and I ended up doing engineering a lot more. However, yeah, they didn't require a portfolio. And I would say that the recommendations were pretty important. So I would do the research. I would say what makes the most sense in terms of recommendations. Like I had Lance Brown's recommendation, and you know, he knows Hillary Brown, who is like coordinating the program and directing the program personally. So that helped. So seeing if they actually have personal connections with the school, and that's pretty useful. And definitely networking. So if you know what school you want to go to, do some of their events, like join their events, go talk to people, speak to people that already went to that school, figure out how you can add things and fatten your resume a little bit more, things like that. And that way you'll have more meat for your essays as well, right?
And finally, Moises.
So for me, everything that I learned that I wanted to go to the school to came from the program Design Discovery. So like when I went there, they literally broke down the application process. Like what kind of people do we look for? Typically, like how do they examine the application, the portfolio? So that doing that program was very helpful. And for me, I hate, well, not that I hate, but like, I don't really like interacting with people or going to these events. So the least contact I could have with them, that's better for me. But the way that I did, I guess, like tailor my application or my education was by I saw a school that I liked, and then I specifically picked the professors who went there or schools similar to that school that I wanted to go to. So sorry. And then, so that's how I guess like I prepared my thinking, my projects, and my portfolio to eventually apply to these very specific schools.
He ended his sentence, which is kind of like the most interesting part of that. Well, if he doesn't come back, I guess I can add on that based on what everyone's saying, networking seems to be the first thing that comes as a through line between everything. Selecting who your professors are, talking to people, having some form of like, obviously research process, but not just through online, but physically is important. Building relationships, developing relationships was said a couple of times. And then what Chitra mentioned, which resume building is important too. What are you doing that you feel a different school is going to be looking at? Is this going to be the studio project you did, or is it going to be the thing you did in real life in a workspace? And I think a couple of things. I would say maybe a quick question. I would I'm probably gonna popcorn this to like one or two people of like, what do you think are misconceptions of masters or higher education that you feel like don't actually, what's the word, aren't real, or maybe you could denounce now or here. I don't know who to ask this to because it's kind of a random question, but whoever feels ready, I would say, go for it.
I think I can go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So Benji mentioned something that I guess like I never thought of. It's really not that hard to get into these schools. I feel like as long as you understand who you are as a designer and like the kind of work that you produce, and you showcase that and like really express like, this is how I design and this is me, and be proud of that, I feel like that could take you a long way. So I feel like as long as you really understand yourself, that can go far for you.
This isn't really a misconception, but kind of like bouncing off of that. For me, it was also like learning to have the confidence in it. I didn't tell anyone, like I only told the absolute people I had to that I was applying because I was so nervous that I wouldn't get in. So like have a little bit more faith in yourself. Like you have a very solid basis. And like that will also help itself in your applications if you have that confidence.
I guess I'll go. Misconception going in, I think that because architecture school can be really challenging and difficult, and our B.Arch for a lot of us was, I felt that grad school, since it's a 1.5-year program, it would be kind of easy. It was really difficult. So be prepared to not slack off. And yeah, it's just like a whole nother monster. And just make sure that you stay healthy and motivated throughout. Just keep your eye on like the finish line. Yeah, so that's, I guess, one that I felt, if possible. You guys are still in grad school, so how are you feeling?
Even to add on to that too, like how does it differ to the B.Arch program at CCNY? These kind of like, what do you immediately tell from the school that was very hard or very easy or maybe even more accessible at these schools?
I mean, I found that the difference between the two were that undergraduate was more about like how to do things. And then graduate school is more about the why we do things and kind of a higher level of questioning in a way. I mean, you do reach that to a certain point in your 4th and 5th years of undergrad, but I think it becomes much more focused in graduate school. And you're also relatively focused compared to undergrad, where City College has like a very broad range of interests and like specializations. It doesn't necessarily have its own like it doesn't have a as strong of a focus as some other schools might have for programs. So it's an opportunity, I think, like in a way, going to graduate school is to complement the two a little bit more.
Yeah, actually, I agree with that. Grad school is a lot more about what you want to explore, any like topics that you're specifically passionate about. And for the same reason, you are required to be a lot more independent. I feel like, at least in City College, it's like you have these very fixed deadlines and it's like you have to deliver and you know when, and you like stay up all night to do that. Whereas in graduate school, it's like your topic, it's your classes. If you don't want to do it, nobody's gonna tell you why didn't you do it. It's just like about how far you want to get and how much you're taking advantage of what you're paying for. So like that is, I guess, not it's opposite from the misconception. Like you have to be really sure why you're going and what you want to explore, so that you continue with that motivation in the moments that you're like, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore. You can remember that.
Maybe one more, especially from Moises and Alicia, that you guys just came out of the B.Arch program pretty recently. Any particular thing you maybe like now of your school versus you didn't have in B.Arch?
I guess for me, it's nice to have, I guess, like a change of like setting. I feel like I got tired of commuting. I live in Staten Island, so commute to City College was a trip. So at least now I'm like close. But as far as like how much different grad school is to B.Arch, it's very different. All the classes that I take, it's basically like taking 4 studios. I'm taking 4 classes, so it's like taking 4 studios. They're all as equally as demanding. And like Benji said, you really have to know what you're there for. And if you get accepted into some of these schools, like they kind of already have like this label on you, like, oh, this person likes theory, this person likes the technical side. So like they kind of piece the cohorts together, and in a way that also helps you to explore your electives or what you end up, I guess, like other courses you end up taking.
As for what's different for me, we're learning British history. Like it's like survey, except everything is about British history, which is a very big change. But also my program isn't design based, which like I was kind of looking forward to. I always really loved the courses that were not like I loved survey, I loved construction tech, I loved my electives, and studio like stressed me out a little bit. So not having that stress on top of things and getting to kind of write the papers and really go into depth on the research is it's a change in a very like welcome way. I get to spend the time on the things that I'm really interested in, and that's why I'm here.
And I guess a summary of that would be the overarching as to why we do things is kind of like a good way of summarizing. As a student, you're there because of what you have to drive that focus. And that differs very much about the B.Arch, which is, teaching you all the fundamentals. I mean, I say fundamentals as if we never stop learning that, but of architecture as we go through that B.Arch is to understand those fundamentals. But yeah. So then now the next topic would be, who in your opinion are candidates that should consider pursuing a master's degree? And you could add on if you have an ideal person who shouldn't also, but I'll leave that to be optional for you. I don't know if anyone has an answer immediately, but that is a.
Yeah, I think there are 3 people who should go to graduate school. I think it's someone who wants to teach. It's someone who really enjoys learning and exploring different things. Or it's someone who needs to go to graduate school for like professional advancement if you're in more of like a corporate level firm, which requires more of an advanced degree or specialization. Or in that regard, also if you want to specialize in something.
I think I can get on board with that list. Yeah. The only thing I would say is like, just don't go for the title because you're spending your money. So be cautious of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think title is like, it has to be really weighed really carefully. The way that I think like all these factors have to be weighed. Like, I don't think just wanting to learn is enough necessarily to go to graduate school. Like you need to weigh that with the affordability of it or like the entire picture. Yeah, I think you're right, Alejandra.
Benji did do a great job at explaining it right off the bat, didn't he? Yeah, I'm like immediately thinking about how do I summarize this? Immediately what he said: learning if you want to learn and continue to learn, teaching if you want to teach, and professional development if your particular degree is demanded in that particular wherever you're trying to work in. And then for the don'ts, the title, the name, the validation, that kind of idea, I think to continue to denounce that is unnecessary, not important. That was quicker than I thought. So do you see yourself now creating your own practice now having a degree? Is there something that now you've learned in your master's program that you feel now that you want to explore? I would say is that maybe enlighten us, if anything, that you're curious on that maybe we didn't get exposed to in B.Arch, but maybe you would expose someone now. Again, a very particular question, if anyone wants a minute.
So wait, the question is if now, because we went to grad school, we're more leaning towards opening our own firm or our own gig.
Mhm. And whether you see some, if this was exposed to you during a time in masters, that maybe you would like to expose yourself if you were to tell yourself in the past in the B.Arch program. It is very, I'm looking at this, I'm like, why did I write that?
I mean, I wouldn't say that now I'm more, you know, I don't know, think that has been like my dream. I don't know if I don't know if I want to be an employee or whatever. But it definitely if it is what I wanted to pursue, a master's prepares you more. I don't think just the B.Arch is a good preparation. I think you learn a lot of independence and management from going to any graduate program. So I would definitely say it helps prepare, and it does, in some way, I would be more open to something like that now that I took a graduate program.
Yeah, I agree with Alejandra a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily also say that if you go to grad school, you should start a firm, because I think starting a firm, well, it depends on what you want to do, but if it's design, then you can start it anytime. But if it's something that, you're actually thinking about making it a professional firm with like all of the liabilities of an architecture firm, I think then you need more experience. And I would actually also add that and answer one of the questions about working before going back to or going to grad school. I think you should work a little bit, understand how to manage your time, and then grad school. The program I was in, I was able to work while I was in school, so that was good because I got my hours done while I was in grad school, which was great. But I would say that. And then I think also working will help you narrow down things that you want to explore further in graduate school, if you want to stay in the profession.
Chitra, I even think that there are some graduate schools that require you to work, at least in architecture, they require you to work for like 2 years before going back to get your MArch too. Yeah, but it is working helps you kind of understand if you're actually, do you actually want to go to graduate school, or are you just like saying it? Because when you start working, you'll know like, okay, I want to go back, or like, I don't want to work, I want to go back to graduate school, and then I'll go back, So it kind of is a test or litmus test for that too. Yeah.
I'm saying that, but I joined right after school. I got it out of the way also. So it's a give and take. It's about what you want to prioritize and such.
But I also think a lot of City College students, like, I think we go to school a little bit later, like a few years in, and we're also working while we're in school. So I think we have a little bit more of that experience, I think, to a certain extent. As opposed to, I think like some schools, the students like don't necessarily have that real world experience. Also, we're in New York. And I think that's also really helpful in terms of like becoming a more well-rounded individual and like kind of understanding the world a little bit more. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, for me, timeline wise, I technically went from bachelor's to master's, but as you said, like since first year, I was like working at a firm basically. So I was getting like some of that experience as well as hours. And from spending that much time there, that's why, because of that experience, I thought I want to expand my skill set outside of architecture. So it was like a segue to go into a graduate program. I think if I hadn't worked and if I hadn't explored what it looked like working at a firm, doing that day to day, etc., connecting it to my B.Arch, I wouldn't have made the decision because I would still have to learn that.
It's interesting. The topic of work comes on this because that's the other career path that you could take right after B.Arch is going straight to a job, starting to go up the rankings of a firm, particularly starting as a drafter in some cases, and then moving on to some form of leader. I would say is that, how do you think, would you have considered working right after finishing the B.Arch? Is there maybe your thought process in this topic of work versus MArch?
Yeah, I think you should definitely work because mostly just to see what you do and don't like about the field, architecture. at least in the program that I'm in, everyone that I talk to basically comes down to, I'm here because I hate architecture, but we're still studying a post-professional architecture degree. So I guess you have to identify what part of architecture you don't like. And I feel like the MR2 becomes, I guess, like your form of, I guess, like trying to combat that or trying to change some part of it. So I definitely think you're going to learn that while working, and it's beneficial too.
I had like personal reasons to do that, the program, the MSAAD program that I'm in, that I just finished immediately after school, because I knew that if I wouldn't do it later, I would potentially not be able to do it because of personal reasons. So I wanted to do it immediately after school, but I also had a contingency plan of working a year or two if I didn't get in immediately. And then apply again, which thankfully I did get in because of the pandemic. To Alicia's point, I couldn't get work during the pandemic, so it was good that I got into graduate school. But no, you're right. I think Alicia's points of like don't go to grad school just because you don't want to enter the workforce is a really, really valid point. Yeah.
I bring that up solely because I see so many TikToks that are like, I'm going to grad school. And then they're like, you get to grad school and there's work. Yeah, don't just do it to avoid getting a job. And my work experience, I didn't work in an architectural firm. I worked for an engineer and I like worked in a museum. So also doing the things that you're interested in, whether they're architecture or not, helps you decide what you want to go into. So like my experience in the museum was super beneficial in like my applications and making me realize that, okay, maybe I want to go into more of like a historical aspect of things rather than only looking at architecture. And so like architectural conservation was kind of a happy medium because I don't hate architecture, you know, but kind of finding the balance between what I want to do and what I enjoy is how I ended up here.
And I think also to allude to one of the previous questions about whether it's like easy or difficult to continue working while you're in grad school, that is 100% up to like the workload that you want to take on and how long do you want to take to graduate. I personally have both a full-time job and I'm in a full-time program. And I am not suggesting to do this because your schedule will be filled up pretty quickly, but it's definitely doable. And if the both are related to one another, you know, you're like getting the best of both worlds because you're learning something in a moment and then you get to apply it at work immediately. So it enriches that experience. There's a lot of programs that also encourage you to, at the end, you know, either do your research or, you know, do a sort of like advanced internship where you get to, again, like apply what you learned. And that is like a requirement to graduate. So you'll definitely, if you are planning on joining the workforce after, we'll need some experience with the new degree that you're obtaining. Or if you were able to get that beforehand, kind of like Alicia, then even better.
And I think I can just end that conversation with saying that there's a lot of working in MArch is a really interesting relationship. You can either be having that contingency plan of going just to work, working while in school, or using work to understand yourself of whether you want to apply to these programs. So there is still a relationship whether you go to MArch or not, or in the time that you go to MArch with work that you should be trying to balance before, I would say before going and applying to these schools. There was also a question asked on the reason or relationship between MArch and B.Arch, being that there's no real sense of it having both of them. To my knowledge, the real benefit of it is teaching, but I believe the speciality is also, Benji, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I think teaching is definitely one of them, but I think that you can teach without an MArch degree. I think you can kind of come in from the side with like more of a historical degree, like preservation, like Alicia's doing, or sustainability, like Chitra did, or even Alejandra would be able to teach like urban or even architectural data informatics. But I think that one of the reasons why I wanted to do an advanced architectural design degree was because I wasn't ready to commit to a historical program, like in the sense that like a fully intensive writing program. But I also wanted to improve design a little bit and like learn from really amazing designers as well to supplement my city college experience. But like graduate school was kind of like, for me at least, the advanced architectural design degree was like a synthesis of like being able to take amazing studios, as well as taking amazing like history theory electives, as well as design electives all at the same time, and kind of like supplementing and building on what I did in undergrad a little bit. And it goes back to my point earlier about like, it's not necessarily the what as much as it is the how or why. Sorry, it's not as much as the how that we learn in undergrad, but it's more like the why we do things. And I think that also like that lends itself to a caveat with graduate school, is that there are a lot more papers than you have in undergrad. So that's something to just think about, is like that it's a different experience in that way for the B.Arch. But there are people who definitely don't like the idea of an M.Arch after B.Arch.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely not needed, and it does help if you have a specific purpose, just like Benji does. At least for me, I definitely wanted to teach, and I was also interested in seeing like where else can this like design thinking that we learned in architecture be applied elsewhere. So for example, currently I'm taking a course at the MIT Media Lab where I'm learning about like space design, how I could use this design thinking to try to get into like some form of like space technology, space architecture, that sort of stuff. So it is true that you do need to have some sort of like specialty that you might want to get yourself into. But for the most part, I don't think it is needed if you're not sure yet.
Yeah, I agree. I also didn't think that having an M.Arch would have been super useful for me. So I did go in with a specialization. And also I knew I wanted to pursue sustainability, because during the B.Arch program, some of the electives were like my electives were urban reconstruction, or anything like preservation related or sustainability related. And even you notice through your design process where your head is, and pay attention to that. Like really focus on how you think and how your brain works and where you spend the most time thinking. And I think that could help figuring out your specialization if you do want to go into grad school.
And I think I'll try to hit you guys with the last question, or actually, before anyone who graduates are open to mentoring. I guess maybe the question of mentoring, I do see, I was going to mention also networking in terms of, I just spoke to someone who's a part of a graduate school, and they were talking that also another benefit would be that when you go to graduate school, you're just so many people to meet, so many people. It's important to meet these people because they have wide networks of other people that you would meet, and they're great places for you to talk to and get opportunities, yes. So I guess with that said, the last question would be, and I'll give you guys a minute to think about this, is that how are you justifying your decision to take part in a graduate program, considering the price, time, and other investments you have in your life with it?
I can start. So the program that I selected was supposed to be more of drawing on any emerging approaches in the disciplines, but not just architecture. I really wanted to explore how other related fields are integrating sustainability and my topic of interest. So that for me was justification. Is like I was learning and networking, and it wasn't the most expensive program. So for me, it was a plus. And through that network and through, I found internships as well, and I did 2 of them while I was also working and in grad school. So my schedule, like Alejandra mentioned, like was packed, and you should really know that everything that you're doing is helping you. You have to stay super organized. And I feel like grad school also taught me that too. It's like how to juggle, how to put yourself out there, network, actually specialize, learn skills. And if you want it to stay more relevant and relative to the, I guess, what's going on in the world, that helps too.
It's been brought up a couple of times, but I kind of felt confident, not confident, but like I was comfortable with my basis that I had in architecture. And so I wanted to kind of explore something new and take the concepts that I've learned and see how they can differ when I learn elsewhere. Here in Scotland, all they talk about is solid masonry wall details, and I am not used to that. So I wanted to get myself out of that comfort zone and kind of see what else I could gain from an experience like this. And so when I came back to the US, if I come back, I could kind of combine all of these things that I've learned and have more of a basis and more things. It's fun, honestly, like have a little fun.
Yeah, I can. I think I kind of echo that, but also I think at a more personal level, it's also like what you think is your like ultimate goal, why you even went into this field. Like you're not required to know when you graduate whether you want to open a firm or join the workforce or what you're even going to do in your career. But I think what's key about going to undergrad is that you kind of start defining what type of contributions you want to do and who you want to be in the professional world. And if that, like, you know, just to speak for myself, you know, goes into like, I don't know, I want to innovate in the architecture field. I want to continue to restore buildings. I think like climate change is key. So I want to go into sustainability, all of those things. When you start to hash out those details in your bachelor's will inform whether you should go to a graduate program and whether or not the investment is needed or not, because you are investing in your future and also investing in who you're going to be after that. So I think like that justified it for me, definitely like the field that I wanted to join, which was like innovating through technology in architecture. Was not something that I think I could have done just with the B.Arch or just joining the workforce. So I thought it made 100% sense.
And to echo Chitra and Alejandra, it's like what they said is you have to know who you are and what you want to be able to do that. It's kind of self-reflection in a way, to their point, to like figure out what you need to do to get there. Yeah, that's, everyone said it so eloquently.
Unless Moises, you have anything to add, I can conclude. But
I think the way that I justify it is that I think, like as I mentioned before, I want to expand that the design that I know has. So like I want to expand that reach that my design has. So at least for me, graduate school is providing that, because I'm taking all these other design courses that are supplementing the human-centered design that I learned in architecture. And yeah.
well, I guess the common theme, I think Benji literally said it right before I was going to say it, which is learning and learning about yourself. That's generally the justification to your decision, is that in these MArch programs, you're going to be learning a lot, and you have to take that and figure out who you want to be and allow this program to kind of shape that a little. And yeah, I guess if you want to be in an MArch, you have to have that motivation to learn, maybe possibly teach, and hopefully develop yourself professionally, and that's in a specialization. So with all that said, I thank everyone who's participated and asked questions, panelists for coming. It was a long time coming, emailing people and all that. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.